Today we're going to be counting down the top 15 dirtiest Springbok rugby players of all time. These players are the most likely to get sent off, start a fight, end a fight, kick somebody when they're down, cheap shots, and illegal stamping. No better place to start than number one, loosehead prop. And this guy is known as MacGyver. He actually got his name legally changed from Dean to MacGyver. Springbok prop who almost took Richie McCaw's head out with a flying, swinging arm, running in at full pace and flying in and catching McCaw on the chin. Only got a yellow card for it, but later cited for 2 weeks ban, and never played for the Springboks ever again. Dean Crayling, only 3 tests, big guy, 135 kilos, 6'1", so he had all the ingredients to be a Springbok prop, but just didn't have it upstairs. Ended up playing French rugby in the second division thereafter and kind of disappeared. Number 2 on the list, this is quite an easy one for anybody that has been following South African rugby for the last 20-30 years. It is none other than the Bullet. I mean, with the nickname Bullet, you know that there's going to be some aggression coming behind that. So number 2 on the list is James Bullet Dalton. Got sent off in the qualifying stages of the Rugby World Cup in 1995 against Canada in Port Elizabeth. Very fiery character, often in the news, fights outside nightclubs, and generally quite a rough diamond. So easy one there is Bullet Dalton. Honourable mention for Uli Schmidt, who was always quite a master of the dark arts, but Bullet Dalton gets that one quite easily. And also special mention for Bismarck du Plessis, who was quite the enforcer in his day, very physical player and often operated on the fringes of legality. Number 3 on the list is quite an easy one. He was big news in 1994 for eye-gouging New Zealand captain Sean Fitzpatrick, none other than Johan Leroux. Much like MacGyver, was pretty much the end of his career. The Springbok brass really don't take kindly to these kind of actions, so to speak. Number 4 kind of picks himself, Mr. Bucky's Botha, the enforcer for many years in South African rugby. 6'7", 120 kilos. When I used to be a sports journalist, I went to go and see the Springbok training, and he looks like an absolute athlete. Massive legs, good speed, one of the tallest guys in the team, just an all-around big dude, and he used to throw his weight around a lot. He's been known for a few indiscretions on the field, most notably against the New Zealand scrum half Jimmy Cowan, who almost decapitated, and he's had many clean outs, and I think I only picked up 4 yellow cards, so he managed to fly under the radar most of the time, but sometimes he just got found with his hands in the cookie jar. And somebody with the best hands in South African rugby over the years, former South African water polo player, I think, at schools level, Mr. Mark Andrews, known as the Psycho by the New Zealanders who hated him. Andrews never used to talk to the other players after the game, and never ever wanted to become friends with his opposition so he could keep his aggression on full blast. Now you might be surprised that even Etzebeth doesn't make this team, because he's been known as a very rough and tough player in the modern era, and actually in quite a few fights when he was younger he's cooled it down a bit, but I think Mark Andrews is just another level up of Psycho. Sure, Earban's probably a little stronger, but Andrews was just a tough, old, dirty rugby player. Very skilled rugby player, but I mean, to be honest, you need a few rough guys in the field. They serve a purpose, but they often get singled out as being thugs, and sadly this is what this list is about. It's almost, you call this the Pirate 15 of South African rugby. There's some great players in here, but all of them have got their disciplinary issues. And speaking of disciplinary issues, our flankers I've got the most choices of here for my World 15 thug list. Now I narrowed down Fetcher number 6 flank down to 2 people in my opinion, and it's Skalk Burger, who's had many yellow cards and a couple of reds over the years. Most notably, he got only a yellow for eye gouging. Berger is most known for his indiscretion, actually quite a bad one, eye gouging winger Luke Fitzgerald in his 50th Test match, ironically, in the 2009 game against the British Lions. That 2009 series against the Lions was arguably one of the most brutal series in all time. It almost marks the transition between sort of traditional rugby where you can get away with rough play and modern rugby where things are a lot tighter. So Skalkberger, and against him for fetch would be Corné Krige. Similar levels, so you could almost say Krige was even a little bit more dirty than Skalk. Skalk is the sort of guy that would fly, actually they'd both fly in, which is synonymous with Krige's KO tackle of Christian Cullen in 2000. Cullen was running full speed and Corné Krige came in full speed and absolutely flattened him and knocked him the fuck out. Credit to Cullen, he was back on his feet in next to no time, but and that's not the first time Krige got caught with his hands in the cookie jar. He was one of the smaller players, so I think he felt like he had to really throw himself around to make himself felt. And you could say, when he first came on the scene with Bommy Skinstad, I didn't see Western Province lose many games with Corné Krige in the team. He was really in the engine room, did the hard work, was one of the first fetchers in the game. But I still think, for eye gouging, still takes it over a high tackle. So Skalkberger is my number 6. 7 is Mr. Berger Geldenhuys, whose cheap shots on Andy Dalton in the Cavaliers tour ended the tour for Andy Dalton in 1986, sending the captain home and brought a lot of disgrace onto Berger Geldenhuys, who never really got his praise thereafter for being one of the greats of South African rugby, but that really tarnished his career. For number 8, you got to go for Gert Small. This wasn't a cheap shot, this was just hard rugby. When Cowboy Shaw was known as the enforcer for New Zealand, and when the Cavaliers came out here, they needed a sheriff, and they had the sheriff in Gert Small. Tried to rough him up after a scrum, and Gert Small was having none of it, and with his painted right straight punch, knocked him the fuck out. So there you go, the sheriff at number 8, just to keep this bunch of rogues in check. And then we get into the back line, which on paper the back line hasn't had as many red cards and doesn't really have as many aggressive characters as the forwards, but I've still managed to single out a few rogues that kind of live on the edge of the law. And number 9 for me would be Rory Cockett, who got sent off for a slap against Adam Thompson and has had other run-ins with the law. Definitely the most feisty and in-your-face scrum off of the modern era that I've seen, and the most likely to get a yellow or red card. And then in fly half's a pretty easy one as well. We got Mr. Butch James, who was known as a bit of a kamikaze pilot in his earlier years. Lots of high tackles, no arm tackles. Sure, he cleaned up his act in later years and eventually won the World Cup in 2007 with the Boks, but earlier days was known as a bit of a red card liability. I was going to throw Henry Honeyball in just for his toughness, but he wasn't dirty like Butch was in his early days. And then number 11, winger. It's got to be somebody from the recent ages. One of the most hideous air tackles I've seen in a long time. It looked premeditated. He could have got out of the way, and almost crippled Bowden Barrett was Kurtley Arendse. After having a stunning start to his Springbok career, scoring tries, he goes up for a 50-50 ball with Barrett. Well, it wasn't even 50-50. Barrett had the ball and he just took his legs out when Barrett was high up in the air and landed on his head. Kurtley also injured himself, but got handed a couple match ban for that. I just find those air tackles when people can see that they're not going to get the ball and continue straight through the player is just abhorrent. Good thing Barrett had a strong neck. Then at inside centre, we got the most argumentative, feisty player who turned into an argumentative, feisty coach. It's quite an easy one at inside centre is Brendan Venter, who got sent off in the 1999 World Cup for South Africa for kicking. Another player, wasn't a horrendous foul, but just shows his sort of irritable personality, and wasn't ideal to see, and actually deserved a red card. And then at outside centre, the centres haven't been the dirtiest in Springbok history, but I think somebody that has certainly come in for his fair share of cards in English rugby while he's been playing over there, Springbok centre Andre Esterhuizen, who got a red card for Harlequins, for elbowing another player. Big guy, 110 kilos, and doesn't mind throwing his weight around on people smaller than him and his own size. But he's probably the most physical of the South African centres at the moment, and he does have a red card behind his name, which is good enough for outside centre. Number 14, cut from a similar class to Bullet Dalton, is, rest in peace, James Small. Smalley! Sent off versus Australia in 1993 for persistent abusive language towards the referee. And he's also been known to swear at his own players and a few slurs here and there, and he's been in and out of the news for all sorts of things over his career. Rest in peace, James Small. You make the South African Rogue 15, which I don't even think Smalley would mind making that. He wouldn't be too far off my all-time 15, so he was a great player, and also quite a fearsome, hot-headed customer. And another hot-headed customer that looks like a choir boy, but got his fair share of cards over the years. Sax boy from my alma mater, Percival Montgomery, who got a red card in 2005 after 2 high tackles against Wales, and then almost got a life ban for pushing a referee in 2003. So yeah, a very likable guy off the field, very humble guy, but on the field, extremely competitive. And with a team of hotheads, you need a hothead coach, and we've got Heineke Meyer, ladies and gentlemen. So let's just take it from the top to recap the side. We've got Dean MacGyver Grayling. Then we've got Bullet Dalton, red card against Canada, and a lot of off the field incidents. Johan LaRue eye gouging Fitzpatrick. Then we've got Bucky's, just known as an enforcer and living on the edge of the law. Mark Andrews, known by his opponents as Psycho. Very, very physical player. Big dude as well. Great line-out jumping, took no shit. And was part of that great Sharks side in the 90s. And also in the World Cup winning side, we played 8th man, which was, I think, great work by Kish Christie. He put another lock in and then played Andrews at 8th man, so he had another line-out option, because we all know World Cup finals are very tight affairs. Then at blindside fetcher 6, we've got Skulk Burger for his eye gouge on the Lions winger Luke Fitzgerald in 2009 in his 50th Test no match, no less. And then at 7 we have Burger Geldnys for his cheap shot punch on Andy Dalton that really put a sour taste on the tour. I mean, Andy Dalton was instrumental in getting the Cavaliers over there, and Burger Geldnys comes in the Northern Transvaal game and just flattens him. And didn't get much kudos thereafter. And then at 8 you have the Sheriff Gert Small, who can handle business, not necessarily a dirty player, but could throw a hell of a punch when needed. Then at 9, Nuggety, in your face, Rory Cockett, red card for a slap on Adam Thompson in Super Rugby. Curtly Arns, a suicidal tackle on Bowden Barrett, lucky not to have killed anybody or put them in a wheelchair. Brendan Venter, just a generally irritable sort of guy. He seems like quite an intense dude. And he was, I think, the only Springbok to get a red card in the 1999 World Cup. Andre Esterhuizen, he's had his fair share of yellow and red cards, and quite a lengthy ban for an elbow a while back. Number 14, James Small, sent off against Australia in 1993 and various other incidents. And Percy Montgomery, the hothead at the back. And Heineke Meyer, I want to swallow my microphone as coach. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Did I miss anybody out? Let me know. Comments below. Like, subscribe. See you later. Peace.
We're a physical side, and so were they. Like I said, as two of our players came off concussed. Do you think we give ourselves concussion?
Dawson making a lovely dart. Here he comes, left to right. Big swinging arm as Pretorius grabs him. He swings hard at Dawson, tried to short arm him, but he catches straight on the jaw Andre Pretorius. From that, Pretorius went down and he didn't come back.